I don't know what the phrasing is in New Zealand for woodshed, but that's where SVG is taking them today. It's a road course runaway. Shane Van Gisbergen dominates and wins Sonoma.
You are unbelievable, man. Awesome job. What a run we're on. Thank you.
Well, interest in NASCAR Down Under has absolutely exploded since Shane Van Gisbergen turned heads around the world and won his first Cup Series race on debut on the streets of Chicago in 2023. We've been following the journey from supercars to the States ever since. And as we approach the playoffs, we're joined by Nick DeGroot from motorsport.com to have a look at the season so far. Nick, first off, thank you so much for taking some time and joining us here on the driver's seat here on SEN.
Yeah, excited to be here. It's crazy to think the playoffs are just 5 weeks away now.
Yeah, man. As you said, 5 races and Shane Van Gisbergen's place in the postseason. Well, let's just say it's caused a little bit of controversy. And we've had legends like, Richard Petty pretty critical of the spot. But at the same time, other big names like Dale Earnhardt Jr. defending SVG. But what's the pulse like with fans about SVG's spot in the playoffs and just the playoffs in general?
Yeah, I was a little surprised when he won his first race of the year in Mexico. People were excited, and then he wins another race, and then he wins another race, and then suddenly the tide started to turn, and it seemed like people started openly criticizing him, road courses, the playoff format, and it was like, whoa, what's happening here? And the first argument was that, oh, he's 30th in points, he shouldn't be in the playoffs. Well, then he wins 3 races, and until then he won at Dover, he was tied for the most wins of anyone this year, and then you can't make that argument anymore. And then it was, well, I don't like the format, or I don't like road courses. We got too many of them, and I just think it's a bit strange because I'm not going to defend the playoff format. I know it has its flaws, but with the system we have, it was built for drivers like Shane Van Gisbergen. That's why he's here. That's why Justin Marks brought him in. He's a guy who is no doubt better than anybody on road and street courses, and a guy who has a high ceiling on ovals. He can get better. He has a long way to go, but he can get better on them. And just like Marcos Ambrose did when he first joined the sport. And I think for some, there's animosity, and for others, there's just frustration. Like, these cars are so equal these days. How is he still so much better? And I think it's gotten to the point of, instead of how do we beat him, it's how do we get less road courses on the schedule? And it's kind of just evolved from that.
And it's funny too, because it is pretty clear that Shane's a road course specialist and the playoffs are primarily ovals, but it all starts at Darlington, and he is still learning how to drive those tracks, obviously. But we have seen, on an oval, things can go wrong very quickly, not just for an individual driver, but for the entire field. So how hard of a challenge will it be in the playoffs in the next month onwards for a guy like SVG, who he still is a rookie? I know he's had a couple of good placings in Xfinity, but Cup Series, as we've seen, is such a huge jump.
See, that's another reason why I think it was good for him to do the year in Xfinity. And even though the cars between Cup and Xfinity, they're very different these days, and it seems like anyone making that step from Xfinity to Cup has struggled, even NASCAR regulars. But I think him experiencing the playoffs in the Xfinity Series and what all goes into it, that's going to help him prepare. Because when you get into these playoffs, the tempo changes, everything changes. Suddenly you have half the field who's racing for nothing but wins. Then you have the other half of the field who's looking at you and going, I hope you have a bad day, and I hope I have a good day, and I'm going to do everything I can to make sure that happens. There's going to be no mercy. It's going to be cutthroat. And I think an advantage he has is all those playoff points now, because he can just, first round, if he just survives, if he can stay out of trouble, he will make it through the first round. And then in the second round, there's a road course. It's very realistic that he could make it all the way to the third round here, which I think freaks a lot of people out, because that's going to push out somebody else who was like, oh, I can make it to the final 12. I can make it to the final 8. Well, I have this wild card in here with all these playoff points and a road course in the middle of it. And I think if he can just keep his head down and stay out of trouble, he can, not easily, but he can make it all the way to the round of 8. And then from there, it's who knows what happens.
He almost sort of puts a target on his back, if you will, when he heading towards Charlotte. I'm sure when we come into that round of the playoffs and we head to the streets of Charlotte, everyone's going to be thinking, well, we better do something to stop this bloke from, standing on the top step of the podium, because, like you said, it all gets whittled down towards that final race and the top four. So this could be actually the worst thing that could happen to Shane heading into Charlotte.
Honestly, if he makes it through the first round and gets to the second round there with Charlotte, I would not be surprised if you see other teams there who have some drivers in and some drivers out who are going to take the drivers who are out and be like, you have one goal today. Stop Shane Van Gisbergen. Stay out. Get in his way. Don't care if you have 40 lap old tires. Make sure he doesn't win because just the way it goes, he's probably going to be lower in points at that point, and he's going to be one of the people who's I can win Charlotte and wreck this whole cut line just like he's done in the regular season, and they're going to go out of their way to try to stop that. So it's going to be interesting. He is a wild card, and I like it. I don't know why there's so many people who don't. I think it's interesting. You have somebody here who's the best road course racer in NASCAR, and NASCAR is not an oval exclusive series, so you got to deal with him. You got to figure out how to beat that.
And we've got a track like Watkins Glen too, which Aussies would know so much from Marcus's 2 wins there. So you're right, it really does sort of throw a cat amongst the pigeons. But before Shane actually got to NASCAR, what was the status of Trackhouse as a team? Because any organization that's got someone like Pitbull as one of the main players and one of the faces of the brand will obviously have people making their own assumptions going that. But prior to that, how was Trackhouse sort of seen in pit road?
See, the funny thing with Trackhouse is they had already established themselves at the time as the team that's going to mess everything up and disrupt everything for everyone because they came out of nowhere in 2022. They bought Chip Ganassi Racing, which was a shock in itself. Then they get this guy, Ross Chastain, who's been around forever, but he's just never really had top level equipment. He starts winning left and right. Daniel Suarez starts winning for the first time in his career. Chastain wall rides himself to the championship four. They almost win the championship. It was just completely out of nowhere. And then in 2023, here comes Shane Van Gisbergen. It's like, you know what? We're going to disrupt again, and he's going to win on debut and shock everybody. And I think Justin Marks, that's what he wanted from the get-go. He loves disrupting the sport. He loves bringing in things that nobody else has thought of and just throwing a wrench into things. And going into that race, there were people who knew Shane Van Gisbergen, like myself, who were like, he gonna be trouble for these guys. And other people had no idea what they were walking into. But if you look at not just that race, but also Trackhouse, they had at that point only a handful of wins, despite almost winning a championship. But two of those were on road courses. You knew they had fast cars on road courses, and now you're bringing in this guy at a street course no one's ever been to. And I think they knew what was about to happen. I just think most of NASCAR had no idea.
And it's funny you mentioned that because I still remember Joey Logano's interview afterwards where it was almost like, at the start of the race, no one had any idea who Shane Van Gisbergen was. By the end of it, everyone knew who he was. And it was just this global sensation. It brought so many eyes to NASCAR. And have you noticed that there has been more international eyes on the product now? And I'm sure that, the people in charge must be loving all these extra eyeballs.
Absolutely. And I think that's another thing a lot of the more legacy and traditional NASCAR fans they lose in this. Like they want to say we want less road courses. The international racing world, that's all they know is road courses. And those races get more international interest. And it's not just the international names in it, like Shane Van Gisbergen, and sometimes other people show up too. We've seen like Jenson Button and other people, but the races themselves are more interesting to them than an oval because an oval's so foreign. It's as foreign to them as it is to Shane Van Gisbergen. It's like, what is this? How does this work? What's going on here? And I think that's the thing about road courses they don't understand. It's bringing extra eyeballs to the sport, whether you have a Shane Van Gisbergen or not. And now that you have Shane, now it's amplified. Now you have people in Australia and New Zealand, they're waking up Monday morning or they're staying up crazy late to watch it. They're going, how'd Shane do? What happened? And I've seen it just in my job. The stories I do on Shane Van Gisbergen, I'll do them after the race at Sonoma. It's like, oh, okay, NASCAR fans, they clicked on the story. But then I get up Monday morning, it's like, oh, what happened overnight? Australia and New Zealand woke up and they were going crazy over it. So I think that's really cool to have in it. It shows that the sport isn't just for Americans.
And we talk about the traditionalists. I mean, this weekend is actually going to be something else that's new and to the category because we got the first in-season challenge champion, and it's well, first off, I don't know if Ty Dillon and Ty Gibbs read the fine print about that $1 million purse that's
Yeah.
up for grabs, but But the fact that we're going to crown a brand new in-season champion, that this is going to be something else that's new, another title that's going to be introduced to the championship in years coming forward, it's almost like the evolution of the sport, isn't it?
Yeah. And I think the cool thing with the in-season challenges, because a lot of people are saying, well, this doesn't have any impact on the points. It doesn't have any impact on the end of the season. It's like, well, that's a good thing. It's something else to look at in the summertime other than just watching the cut line and the playoff points and the winning you're in. And I love what it's done because we're talking about Ty Dillon and Ty Gibbs. We would not be talking about them right now if it was not for this thing. And I said it to somebody yesterday, whether Ty Dillon wins the whole thing at Indy or not, he's already won. The TV time he's gotten, the attention he's brought to his team and his sponsors, the personality that he's been able to show. I think it's a fantastic way to kind of take a spotlight and put it on some other people that we wouldn't normally be looking at.
It's something similar here because, as you mentioned, you've kept an eye on supercars as well. We're going to be starting our own sort of playoffs format this year, and a lot of people have gone and said things like, like, oh well, Brock Feeney's doing so well, but this means nothing until Adelaide. But every race means something. I mean, now you've got Chase Elliott. Yes, he's the leader of the regular season standings, but right now you're worried about the back end of guys like Ty Gibbs that we just mentioned, who might not even make it past the end of August. Kyle Busch, also the same deal. Bubba Wallace is within the cut line, but he might not be with the handful of races that we got. There's just so much interest. Every race is must-see TV.
Absolutely. And another funny thing with Chase is he's the regular season points leader. He could very well be the regular season champion, and some bonus points come with that. But Shane Van Gisbergen still has more than him, and he's probably going to win Watkins Glen and get even more points. So again, you just look at the playoffs this year, and I think nobody can predict what's going to happen. There's so many people with just one win or no win. Then you got guys like Shane that have three wins and potentially four before it's over. And I think we're going to go into the first round of the playoffs and nobody's going to be safe. There's going to be some people with a buffer, but no one's going to be safe. You could have Denny Hamlin and Chase Elliott out in the first round because they're going to only have like a 10, 15 point buffer over the cut line in one bad race, and that's gone instantly and then some.
Yeah. And look, Nick, you've been very generous with your time, but before I let you go, I do want to ask, as I said, there's been a lot of eyes from our part of the world on NASCAR. In fact, we're sending our drivers over there in droves. We're doing our absolute best. Guys like Will Brown and Cameron Waters and Brody Kostecki having cameo appearances. But there was rumors, and this has been the rumor mill for such a long time, getting one of your guys down here. We were so close to having Kyle Larson come over. That unfortunately was parked up, and probably because he tried to do what was the most insane thing in the world and do the triple. But do you see that there is a need? Because for a lot of Australian drivers, they're just like, oh, it's the great unknown. It's the holy grail to go over there and do NASCAR. A tale as old as time. We've seen Marcus Ambrose do it in the early 2000s. We've seen Dick Johnson do it back when in his heyday. Everyone in Australia would love to go have a crack at NASCAR, but is that something that is reciprocated back then? Because I don't really see too many drivers trying to come down here and do our tin tops. Do you ever see a reason why maybe there's not too many NASCAR drivers that are keen to take on supercars, or is it just maybe the insane distance?
I honestly think part of it is the season, for 38 weeks, and they just want all the off time they can get at that point. I mean, I think there's 28 consecutive weeks this year without an off week, which is just absurd. I don't think it's ever been that bad. But for me, I've always wanted to see these guys go out and try other forms of motorsport. And I say that about F1 drivers too. I feel like F1 and NASCAR drivers, they're similar in a way where they're so insulated in their little world and they never branch out. It's like, please do. I want to see 10 NASCAR drivers in the Rolex 24. I want to see them go run Adelaide. And I know we were close with Larson and Bush, and I feel like there's so many drivers that would do that and not necessarily go out and just win the thing. Those supercar drivers, they're animals on those road and street courses, but I think they'd have a heck of a time and it would bring more exposure to NASCAR, to the international audience. Like, we're not just, the American Tin Top Series that has Shane Van Gisbergen. We got our own personalities. We got some interesting drivers too. So I'd love to see him branch out, but I just think the grueling nature of the season, it just kind of makes them all go, whatever off time I can get, I'm going to take. And I think that's another reason why people love Kyle Larson, because yeah, he's not racing all around the world, but he's racing every week in sprint cars and something. He's always racing something. I think that's why he's got so many fans.
Absolutely, 100%. And that was one of the main disappointments because we see what he's just a guy that seems to have a crack. I mean, there's not a lot of people that would go to do NASCAR, IndyCar, everything all within the space of a weekend or two. But he is that guy that just seems to be that crazy. But Nick, you've been
Mhm.
incredibly generous with your time, and thank you so much for joining us here on the driver's seat. If you're interested in catching up with most of Nick's work, you can find his writings on motorsport.com. He does a fantastic job. Please don't be a stranger on the driver's seat, Nick. More than happy to have you back on, especially as we head deep into the playoffs. We might have another catch up a little bit later on if that suits your schedule.
Absolutely. This is fun. I'd love to do it again.